As the United States entered the 20s, Americans were feeling very good at their place in the world. They began to get back to working, but there were still some problems. American workers began to overproduce and bought too many goods on credit. American consumers owed too much to the banks, and deflation increased those values even more. All Americans began to lose trust in banks and stop buying, so they all put their money back into their pockets. Since no one was buying, companies stopped producing so much, and since they didn't need as many workers anymore, workers were fired. The government did not help those workers, and they also ended up losing their homes to the bank due to loans. Economic instability caused families to jump to conclusions and quickly jump to blame. Families were torn apart, and divorces became more common. Laid-off workers were starving and began bread lines in soup kitchens. Half of the American workers were unemployed. Economic hardships forced many to go into a mental breakdown and drove others to suicide. Americans were angry at what had happened to them and wanted the government to step in. Once the Great Depression reached the banks of America, the banks stopped loaning money to other countries. The countries quickly realized that they were being hit by the Depression, quickly became poor, and also demanded their governments to help. The American Congress in Washington then passed a tax on imported foreign goods, but as a result, Japan, Germany, England, France, and all the other countries also closed off their trades to America. Since no trading was being done, everyone began to lose money. In attempts to fix their economies, England and France gave unions more of a say and began giving out more jobs. These countries decided to try something a bit different: socialism. This allowed the government to give direct relief to the poor and hungry. Germany's Weimar Republic began to overprint more money and just gave it to the people. The money, though, eventually deflated and lost value, becoming slightly expensive toilet paper. Germans turned against the Weimar Republic. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, America's new president, began to lift the American spirits by giving words of encouragement and wrote hundreds of bills to get America off the ground. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was a strong, inspirational man, the perfect thing to help America get out of the Great Depression. He began an economic and social welfare program in aspects of relief, recovery, and reform. It was called the New Deal. Relief was giving direct money and assistance to the people so they would start buying again to stimulate the economy. Recovery was recovering American businesses so they would start hiring again. Reform dealt with fixing the banks and making sure they wouldn't ever fail again. The programs did not solve the Great Depression, but it certainly helped America out tremendously. Because of its actions of jump-starting the economy, the role of the federal government grew tremendously. Many began to feel that President Roosevelt was becoming a dictator. They felt he had too much power. Countries negatively affected by the Treaty of Versailles, mainly Germany, Japan, and Italy, looked towards fascism to help them through the Great Depression. The Germans, miserable and embarrassed. The Japanese were angry at the racism, and the Italians felt left out. As everyone else recovered and kept democracy, those three countries overthrew the government with militaristic ideals. Fascism. Each fascist government had a leader. Germany had Adolf Hitler. Japan had Hideki Tojo. And Italy had Benito Mussolini. Britain, France, and America adopted the ideas of appeasement. As long as they weren't affected by the fascism, they wanted no part of it. The Germans' quest to rule over Europe was interrupted by the attempts of the French and British. The French, sadly, though, were beat down, and the Germans sent the British with their tails between their legs. The Germans also began to invade the Soviet Union, but Soviet Union struggled to repel them. America was enjoying its cheerleader role, but Franklin Delano Roosevelt wanted to sell supplies to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had all the men they needed, but they lacked supplies. For every 2 men, 1 man was given a gun, and the other was given ammunition. The Japanese craved the valuable resources harbored in the Philippines by Americans, so the Japanese planned to take it. They heavily attacked Pearl Harbor, hoping to permanently cripple America. It did not. Instead, it threw America into war. America, along with the new hopeful Britons and the many Russians, became a powerful resistance against the fascist movement. In order for America to participate in the war, many things had to change. President Roosevelt rationed food, gas, and metal. He basically changed America from a market economy to a command economy, in which he ordered American businesses to stop producing goods for the citizens and to begin manufacturing warfare. American women helped again with the building of tanks and planes so men could fight. African Americans and Mexican Americans also helped in the war and were not discriminated against, but Japanese Americans were highly discriminated against and were sent to concentration camps. America soon learned that the Japanese would not surrender at all. They were willing to fight to the death, even if it led them to suicide. President Harry Truman, the successor of Roosevelt, decided to drop chaos upon Japan. Atomic bombs. 2 bombs were dropped, first on Hiroshima and then on Nagasaki. Japan finally surrendered, but at the cost of bringing the world to an atomic age. Europe and Asia had been severely impacted by the war and had to deal with poverty and starvation. The United Nations was created, and this time it included Germany, France, and China. Since European Jews were nearly wiped off the face of the earth, they tried for a Jewish state in Palestine and created Israel. As the Soviet Union and the United States were the only 2 superpowers left in the world, they were rivals, competing for a common goal. Each side began rallying up countries to alliance themselves with, and from the rubble and ruins of World War II rises the Cold War.